Noon, November 14, 2022. Welcome to the Wright County Health and Human Services Board meeting. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Got a good-sized group here today. We'll get through this. First is the meeting minutes from October 10th. Anyone have any changes or additions or deletions?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to adopt the October 10th minutes.
Second.
Motion made, Commissioner Vetch, seconded, Commissioner Wetter. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Next, review and approval of the agenda. Anyone have anything to add, change, or delete from the agenda today?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve today's agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Hewson, seconded by Commissioner Delighten. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is the consent agenda. Anyone have anything to add or remove from the consent agenda? If not, if there's a motion,
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
motion made, Commissioner Delighten, second, Commissioner Hewson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Now on to the regular agenda. Staffing announcement, letter A.
Yes, thank you, Board. I do have a number of staff here that I would like to introduce to you as soon as I find my list. The first person is not here today, so Maria is not with us today, I don't believe. She'll be with us in December. Then from there, we have Robin Wheaton. Robin is a new social worker. Robin, if you'd like to stand up. She's our new social worker. She is in our child protection. We're very original. We have CP1 and CP2. So Robin is in CP1. She reports to Julie Bimboom, and she started with us on 10/24, since it's October 24th. So welcome, Robin. If you'd like to tell the commissioners a little bit about where you've been and where you live now, and any other comments you have.
Okay, I'm originally from Superior, Wisconsin. I moved down here in June of 2021. I started working with Minnesota Care Partner in their Families Forward program, which was working with families in child protection in Hennepin County. And I was the therapeutic parent specialist. I did all the intakes for the parents coming into our parent mentoring program. And then I took the most difficult families. I'm trained as American Family Therapist, and I have my LPC in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So I worked with families very, very closely, and I absolutely fell in love with social work and working with families. And so I had heard lots of good things about Wright County. So I was very lucky to be able to join here. And it took a little bit of time to get in with everything, but I absolutely enjoyed I'm on my fourth week. So.
Sounds like we should maybe do a video of recruitment and have folks that are, yes.
I know, right.
Yeah.
And Robin, where do you live right now?
I live in Newell.
Okay.
I'm still in Hennepin County.
Welcome, Robin. Thank
We
you.
were able to take one from Hennepin County.
Yeah,
area,
for
sure,
so
exactly.
usually it's the other way around. They're trying to take them from us. So.
Thanks, Robin. We also have Tanya
welcome.
Finley. She's a social worker in our Child Protection 2, our CP2 team, and she's been with us since Halloween, 10/31. So welcome, Tanya.
My name is Tanya. I currently reside in Elk River and commute to Wright County. I came with experience 22 years in law enforcement, and then I transferred to Olmsted County, where I worked as a safe harbor caseworker and then worked as a social worker for general crime victims. And I started on the 31st, so excited to be here.
Welcome, Tanya. Thank you. What law enforcement agency did you work for?
The last under my career was with Maple Grove for 16 years.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank
And
you.
both Tanya and our next individual, Adam, both report to Molly Marty. And so Adam Johnson's a social worker. He's also in our CP2 group, and he started us also on 1031.
Nice.
I'm Adam Johnson. I live in Monticello. I came from Stearns County. Prior to that, I was in Hennepin County. Worked in public assistance in Hennepin County, and then I worked in public health and mid-choices in Wright County. Took a little bit of a break, and now I'm here. Happy to be here in Wright County. I also heard a lot of good things about the county and the county does business here. Like I said, I live in Monticello, so Wright County is my county.
So you got it both ways. You work for the Wright County and you live in the Wright County compared to those other two people.
Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. And finally, we have Jessica Schmidt. She's our new child support officer. She's on our child support team. She started on the 7th. So Jessica's our newest member. Welcome, Jessica.
Yeah, my name's Jessica, clearly. I live in St. Michael. I've lived there for about 6 months. And prior to this, I worked in medical equipment, and then I did long-term care in Milwaukee for about 7 years. So yeah, I'm happy to be here, and nice to have coworkers again in person. So.
Very good. Thank
Welcome.
you, Jessica. Welcome.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Jessica.
everyone. Glad to have you aboard.
Yeah, welcome to all of you that live in the Wright County and those other people. At least you're smart enough to work for the Wright County.
They'll probably
It'll
move
come.
here.
It'll come.
All right, next employee of the month for December, Jamie.
Yes.
Don't be shy.
So, board, today we have Kelly Heastand. She is our December employee of the month. Kelly joined financial services in September of 2010. And I believe she was a EOM at, well, yes, but you were an employee of the month way back when. She later joined the assessment team in social services in August of 2019. Kelly is an energetic, efficient, and a collaborative member of the team. She is the first to volunteer to be a trainer and to assist with special projects and committees. She was an integral member of the Continuous Improvement Committee working with the new building project and its amenities. She's developed countless job aids that she selflessly shares with her team to enhance efficiency and accuracy. Kelly is community-minded and shares her time and talents broadly, both within and outside of our agency. She's a tremendous asset to the agency, team, and our community. Kelly's nominator, and this is one of the nominations that came from outside, so from an actual client that we always like to receive. Kelly was so incredibly kind, patient, and knowledgeable when going through the process with us. Being the caregiver for someone with Parkinson's is very overwhelming, and she was very understanding, took the time to truly listen to both my dad and me. She took a lot of stress out of what felt like too much to juggle. My dad and I really appreciated her. My dad was qualified for the alternative care that he needs. She took the time to listen to his and our family needs to give him the care he needs now and what she will need as his disease progresses. So thank you, Kelly, and congratulations on being our HHS December Employee of the Month. Say, before Kelly has a chance to say anything, I just wanted to, I think what I really appreciate about staff that kind of go between different divisions and coming from financial services and learning all of that. And then you were a financial worker.
Wow.
Well, she worked in our office support team, and she kind of really, I would say between she and Amy were the dynamic duo those years ago, where they ran the third floor basically. And then when Kelly moved over, made the big shift over to the Human Services Center and brought her talents with her there. I think it only helps for our entire agency when we have folks that can be kind of multi-layered throughout and have all this information. Like I just heard that Adam was a financial economic assistance worker in another county. I think that perspective just helps and informs all of the different programs that we have. So that's always very helpful. So Kelly, would you like to say anything?
Sure. I just want to say thank you. I don't know. I really enjoy working here. I've been here 12 years. Like Jamie said, I started in financial assistance as an OT2 or whatever it was back then in 2010. And then I was a child support case aide for like 4 years. And now I've been doing this current job for 3 years. And I don't know, I really like it. We have a great team and people that work here. And so I enjoy it. And I live in the Wright County as well. So
You're good.
just had to add that.
Another smart person.
Yes.
Thank you.
So
Kelly.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you so much.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
All right, next is to accept a resolution for an October donation 2022.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept the resolution for the October donation.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. And any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Wetter.
I was just curious, it put these donations under special needs fund, and I was curious what are the special needs? What are they used for?
So the special needs are separate from like our county crisis funds that we get funding for. The special needs funds are all contributions or voluntary donations that we then use for our clients. Michelle Miller, would you like to expound on that at all?
You can stay here, Kim, so I'm not going to steal any thunder. Special needs, we use it for a whole variety of situations that families are in. Typically, it's a one-time need. It might be a gas card. It might be assistance with getting a vehicle repaired so they can get to work, assistance with paying some bills so they can stay with their home and their kids, those types of things. So it really is Christine Treichler, one of the supervisors that reports to me. She runs the program. We have a policy that we follow. We work with financial. We work with Salvation Army to make sure that other funding sources are looked at first, because the money is really, it's just what we get from donations from the community. But it's been around for many years and has been fantastic. I mean, Wright Hennepin has given us donations. We have churches and community groups, and really we just process the money and it goes right back out to the county, and keeping folks, I feel like, supported, which is part of our mission statement, and just, yeah.
And it kind of feels like, I think it's not something like we would advertise, but as we're working with people, you know, whether they're child protection client or whatever area we're working with them, and these things kind of trickle up as far as this is a barrier to them, you know, being successful or being self-sufficient within their home or something, then we would bring these funds out to help them out. So,
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Wetter.
You mentioned the other fund too, so what's the difference between those two?
So like county crisis funds, you would need to be eligible through fill out the application for a county crisis, and that funding actually comes through the state of Minnesota. Is that federal funding? I think it's MPIP funding, so probably federal funding. And then you have to be like under 200% of federal poverty guidelines. You have to have a minor child in your home. You have there's all kinds of rules that go with that. The special needs funds may or may not go to a family with a child in the home. It's somebody with a need that's identified that we can help with. And again, we have a process for it, so we would be reviewing.
So would you say that special needs fund is maybe a quicker process than the federal applications and all that, or?
It can be, and I know it's been used for potentially kids that have special needs that are in a home that, for a class, special class or equipment and some of those kinds of things has come up. So yes, it's just kind of that additional funding that if we didn't have it would just be, they were just out of luck. They wouldn't have any other place to go to. So as far as being faster, I think it really just depends on the situation. We can process things fairly quickly, but we all know that that's not always the situation depending on staffing and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank St. Michael American Legion, the B.D. Humphreys Legion, Clearwater, Buffalo Lions Club, and Maple Lake Lions for the donation of a total of $1,800. So appreciate that.
Yep, thank you. Good question and answer and explanation for us too. So roll call vote on the resolution. Commissioner Vetch?
Aye.
Commissioner Wetter?
Aye.
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 Okay, resolution passes.
Thank you.
Next is review county and tribal burial policy and procedures with Kim Johnson. And just a little background, I was approached by one funeral director that thought we should take a look at this. It hadn't been reviewed in many years, and to see if the costs that were given by the county are keeping up with the actual costs of funeral services. And I reached out to another funeral director in the area, and they felt the same way. So we lined this up, and funeral homes were invited to be here today to listen and speak with us. So Kim, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Wright County provides county burial funds for its residents who are determined indigent. So payment for county burials is required by the following two state statutes. So if a person is indigent, the county is required to pay the necessary expenses for the final disposition. Now, I've put a comparison here together by county, but keep in mind, these are not perfect numbers. These are estimates because it is very difficult to derive what exactly we pay because we don't speak the same language as the funeral homes. And so I did request some information from the funeral homes, and because we don't do the same business, it doesn't come across necessarily exactly the same. So we're not always comparing apples to apples. But you can see here with this slide, some counties pay more, some counties pay less. I want to point out that the cremation here that Wright County is paying at $2,000 is in practice normally paid at $1,600. The difference would be if we had to provide a actual burial for the cremains. Normally, actual practice is that a family member would take the cremains and we would not pay for that burial at that time. So anyway, each county has their own policy and procedure for this. Hennepin County is a little bit interesting in the fact that they provide $3,000 for a burial, a county burial, but they actually allow the family to provide an additional $2,000. So now you can see how difficult it is to really compare the apples to apples here in these situations. But you can see that, Wright County is at $2,600 for a burial, and McLeod County is at $2,400. We're right in line with Sherburne. There are some that are a little more. Anoka is more. Hennepin is more. So that is just something to keep in mind as we move forward.
And Board, if you have the handout for that, you should have the county paid burial and cremation handout. On page 3, it lists what Kim is explaining: a cremation with professional services, $1,400, with professional services and memorial services, $1,600, and with if a gravesite is needed, up to $400. So those are some of, and that might not translate necessarily into how the providers of funerals in our county would, say that there's how their services run. And I do want to, as far as what Commissioner Katchmark said earlier, it's been over 30 years since we've done any increase in our county burial amounts. I think it's been about 31 years. The county board revisited this several years ago when I was in Kim's position, and we left with the same amount, and we just kind of tweaked our policy here, here and there. We have enjoyed, I think, a good relationship with most of our funeral providers, and we just wanted to invite them here today to see what they could inform the board about as far as looking at what these prices look like and what the cost of the county is.
And thank you, Jamie. And just a little further, it's interesting that this fee was set 30-some years ago, but if you look at it today, we're all within a couple $100. So I was trying to find the meeting minutes from 30-some years ago that justified the board's decision to come up with that price, because everything has gone up in 30-some years. And we didn't know what all the other counties were doing with their rates, but you fast forward to this year and they're so close, which was, I just was trying to get to the bottom of that part, but.
Maybe we were really far ahead back then,
Maybe.
or nobody else has looked at it in 30 years.
Right. And I think probably the funeral directors could talk to it more than I can, but I think we obviously know in the last 30 years the trend has been toward more cremations. I think the cost, I don't have any sociological kind of explanation about why it is what it is, but you're right, we're fairly close with a lot of the other counties.
Yeah. And Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I was surprised that burial and cremation were so close in cost, so it'd be good to hear from the funeral homes.
So Wright County Financial Services has been entrusted with the county burial program and remains good stewards of the county dollars expended, while keeping in mind all of our loved ones deserve respect without consideration for the ability to pay. I know we have at least 3 members from the funeral home community that might like to take the opportunity to come up and talk. So if I'll just step aside here, and if anybody wants to.
Yeah, we have members of, I'll call it the Funeral Directors Union of Wright County, if there was such a thing. I don't know how much of a union there is, but if you do step up, if you would like to spell your name and say which funeral home and the city that it's located in, so our minute taker gets that in the record. Anybody?
Hello, thank you for having us. We really appreciate you inviting us to the meeting, sincerely. I'm Brian Dingman, B-R-I-A-N, Dingman, D-I-N-G-M-A-N-N. I'm with Dingman Funeral Care in Annandale, Kimball, and Maple Lake. In looking at our burial policy, this is actually, I serve on our state board association, currently our president. And that state association is looking at these numbers across the state. So this meeting was actually very timely in that. Our portion of the state is the lowest of really anywhere. So if we look at outlying counties, it's, I think Wright County might bring that to where it's at with a lot of different spots as us being the low price of, if you will, for any of the counties. If we go to Southwest Minnesota, they have a one human services department for multiple counties. For example, their county pays up to $3,800 towards cremation or burial. They will pay whatever the funeral home's direct disposition fee is. So if whatever the direct burial or direct cremation is, up to $3,800. Their families are allowed to pay for the actual embalming costs, body preparation costs if they want that, and a ceremony if they want that. So their $3,800 doesn't include those costs. That's the same way in multiple other counties across the state. I just use theirs because that's 6 counties with exactly the same policy. So that's a big grouping. In addition to that, if it's burial, they reimburse for casket and outer burial container and the cemetery fees. Currently with the policy, with the amounts allowed for burial, a funeral home, so I just went on, and this is wholesale pricing, the minimum that I can pay for a casket. Keep in mind, I can do something that's cardboard that's designed for cremation, for burial. But those amounts, the minimum I can pay for a non-sealed casket by the time it's delivered. So the casket price is less than this, right? But I got to get it at the funeral home, $681. The minimum cost to get a grave liner to a cemetery, so that's a minimum vault that most cemeteries require. Depends upon where in the county because they charge a mileage fee. Okay, so $904 to $940, depending upon where the county is. So those 2 items right there eat up really 100% of the money. So now the funeral homes completely working for free from that point forward. Doesn't cover anything. If there's embalming, let's say we need to do embalming, chemicals aren't cheap. And we're doing the process for free. So we really appreciate any look at this, and any increase on it is really appreciated. I like the way the Southwest County's way is. The county pays for direct disposition. That's what's, really for public physical health, that's really what's needed. It doesn't cover public mental health, but it does cover that, at least that physical health portion. And then maybe look at allowing people to do some upgrades. The backside of that, and there's a disadvantage. Everything's a 2-sided coin. Once we start allowing people to upgrade, then some of those people that maybe have means somewhere else, they're going to use the county system in that case. So those are tough conversations that I don't have the answer for. And as a taxpayer and as a funeral director, I have different answers probably for both of those questions.
So to Brian's point, in our book, it's the way that we've run this program to date has been, if it's a county burial, it's a county burial, and it's not a subsidized burial. So even if the family had $1,000, the county would only pay the difference. So if it's $2,600, we would only pay $1,600 to offset what the family is. What Brian's talking about, I believe, is like in other counties, potentially the family could come to the door with some money, but not enough to pay for the entire burial, and the county would then kind of wrap around that and exceed what like, because we're just either, you're either yes, a county burial, or no, a county burial. And if it's yes, then it can only be what the county would provide, up to that dollar amount. So it's a different, and I'd say a lot of counties are like that, but we have seen counties where it's reflected the way that Brian's talking about, where families can contribute to things. So the county portion doesn't go to maybe the memorial service or flowers and things like that, but the family can contribute to that, and the county would pay the kind of necessities of the burial. Is that a right way to say it?
Yeah, yes, families can come to the table with some funds
Right.
that really aren't items that would be county portion.
Right, so for us, just for like making a determination, it's easier to say there isn't, they're indigent and they would require a county burial, or they're not indigent and there's other means available. So that would be, if the county wanted to elect to do something, that would be a change.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Vetch.
Because this is a subject I'm not quite as knowledgeable about. So when you accept a body, and I'm assuming then at that point, if they don't have, because you don't know if they have money to pay for it or not, and at that point, if you find out they don't have any choice. You're stuck having to, is that the way the case is?
Correct. The law is pretty clear in Minnesota, and really we have very good consumer protection laws in funeral service. The consumer is very well protected.
So in that case, basically, whether the county only gives you $500, you're basically doing volunteer work for a day, and then some.
Multiple days, yeah.
Yeah, multiple days. But okay, I want to understand that, because that's the biggest point of making sure that they're compensated at least to meet their cost. And right. I mean, because having a forced volunteer work isn't a good business practice.
Mr. Chair. Oh.
Mr. Houston?
Yeah, you mentioned, Brian, that if you do the embalming, I thought that was required by state. We don't have to embalm in Minnesota, or we do?
No, so embalming is required.
Okay.
If we're holding human remains, without refrigeration for 72 hours or longer.
Okay.
So we can have a direct burial or direct cremation, and either one of those occur within 72 hours of the death, and embalming's not required.
Okay.
We can extend that to 5 days if refrigeration is used.
That's good information, because I thought it was required, so we do have more of the natural burials that if it's within 72 hours. Okay.
And
Thank you.
Just give you guys an idea of overhead. So we hire a consulting company that really looks at our overhead and all of our prices and what we need to pay staff and all that sort of stuff. And they give us an amount of what we should be charging for things. Doesn't mean that's what we use, but they give us that amount to cover the overhead. So this is without the casket, outer burial container, with any merchandise, no services, no embalming, no preparation of the body. Per family that walks in our door, if we have a direct burial with none of those items before merchandise, they tell us we need to have $33,575. That's per call to cover our overhead, those expenses, operations. Okay. If we have a cremation with no service, so direct cremation with nothing, they tell us that amounts $3,150. So that's coming from an outside consulting firm telling us, they're also our accounting firm, they're a separate line between there, but they're telling us some amounts that are real numbers. So as a funeral home, we discount that for people that don't have it, because my counterparts here, I feel like funeral directors we want to do what's right for people, and we're not going to deny somebody what they need, but we also need to keep doors open and moving forward.
And in those expenses, your professional service takes some of that too, right?
Well, this is what they're saying we need to collect just to keep doors open, right?
You're paying him to come up with, that's just an extra service.
Oh,
You have to pay the professional service also.
Yes.
Right. Commissioner Hewson, Wetter.
You haven't mentioned at all the burial site costs.
Mm-hmm.
So what do they average, or I'm sure it depends on the cemetery, or like in the case of cremation, whether they're going to bury it or whether they're going to take it with them.
And so some things with this, with cremation, from a mental health perspective, we encourage everyone to do something permanent with remains, not hold on to them on the shelf. What we knew about cremation 20 years ago, we've really learned we really didn't know from a mental health perspective. And it's not saying that cremation causes any items. It's some of the things that we sometimes do around it, you know, that we wouldn't think of with burial. So cremation isn't, but there's very healthy ways. But why I say that is because one of the ways to do something permanent with cremated remains is the cemetery, right? That's a way that we can permanently do it. So cemetery costs, this is just funeral home overhead costs. So in addition to that, yes, graves, I would, in Annandale and Maple Lake, the municipal cemeteries, they're $500. That's what graves cost. That's the low end for a grave. $100 to, I would say, roughly $600 in Annandale and Maple Lake is what the interment fee is, so that's above that. And then we need to open that grave. So for cremation, Annandale, Maple Lake, $250. It's to $800, depends upon which cemetery and which digger. Okay. So right there, we can easily have $2,000 in cemetery expenses.
And board, right now, what we
that's right
pay
there.
is the opening and closing of a grave under a traditional burial of $500. And for either a cremation or a traditional burial, the grave site, we have $400, up to $400.
So basically, they're capped at the 2,000, correct, on that cremation side?
Yes.
All in, which.
And what they're saying is that they usually would only get the $1,600 because it's a kind of a rare case where there'd be a $400 at this point for the burial site, for the cremation.
The way the county policy is currently written, a family can take the remains. So that's legally the final disposition is the cremation itself, not the burial. So there's no legal reason that they would have to bury. Therefore, the county only covers the burial if there's no family to take the remains.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Newsom?
Jamie, I remember we had this discussion several years ago. It wasn't necessarily updating policy, but we had the discussion. I think when we got probably with our budget or in that discussion.
We've had the discussion over the years, yes.
Right, and at that time, it seems like we had a handful of burials, for indigent people. So what numbers are we looking at?
I think we're budgeted at around $35,000 as the county for the annual year. Is that about right? Okay, about $35,000. I know we've had years where we've had, we've been upwards of $45,000 or $50,000. But I think right now we're probably, I don't know how many burials this would mean, but.
Between 35 and 50 a year.
Right, but as far as the number of burials?
Between 35 and
50. Oh, 35, okay.
Oh, 35 and 50 burials? Because that's up quite a bit from where it was.
Yes.
A lot, I mean, yeah.
And the great majority of those are cremations.
So we're not even paying out the max 2,000 to a lot of them. We're only paying, a lot of them you're only paying
1,600.
1,600. It was 2,000 in the burial. So.
Yeah, because it just seems like the last time we really had this discussion, we had, a few per year, so.
It's always been more than a few, and I think
like
again
10
that.
or something. It
Right,
wasn't
and
much.
so yes, we pulled a list of our 2022 people to date, and I think almost exclusively they were all cremations, so very few opted for the traditional burial. And what the other piece that happens with the budget is if we in fact do approve a burial kind of prematurely because everything's happening very quickly, we will potentially have a collection case against a family if we find out that there were assets that could have been dissolved in order to pay for the burial. So we do at times have money coming back into that budget to offset the costs when we have situations like that.
And
Our goal is to not have those situations because it's best just to, have a decision up front without having to go after the family later.
and there was a column on the unpaid or uncollected debt for this, wasn't there?
Yep.
Okay, I think that generated some attention also. Commissioner Vetch?
And Mr. Chair, I follow on the ones that, okay, if you went and we had to claw back money later, you basically stole from the funeral director because he's already doing this at a lost revenue, and he wouldn't have done that if.
Well,
if
I wouldn't characterize it as stealing from the funeral director.
Well,
But we would be reimbursing
he's
the
losing
county.
money on this. I mean, he's in a lot of these cases, he's subsidizing it out of his own pocket to do the work. And if they ended up having assets, I would say they found that he had $25,000. Well,
But there's another probably statute that talks about what we can collect, and this would be one of those things that we could collect under statute from a family that would, I'm not saying that they would have misrepresented what their means were, but maybe later on we find out that somebody had a vehicle or somebody had something that wasn't attached.
We've had that a couple times, and that's, all of those cases have been, they really, you're not, they're not finding $20,000.
No. Okay,
You're finding a vehicle, you're finding, right, I mean, that's been my experience where it's come up. It's not like they had a home that, they would have just been not qualified, because those sort of things, you see it right away. And so we would actually appreciate the way it is now, where the county goes after those funds, because we can't do anything with the body until we get approval. And we've got, 72 hours.
Well, I'm glad to hear that he agrees that you guys are that for the most
So
part.
I would not
money,
make
so
that
that's good.
statement at all. I would,
Right.
yeah.
So Brian, on the business side of this, you have to be tactful. In the middle of the night, you get a call and someone is potentially needs your service. You do have an option, well, how you address it. You could ask, what's the method of payment here, or however you want to address it, or you choose not to and you just take the risk, right? But you don't have to take the business. I mean, you're not required to take it whether they can pay or not, right? It's just kind of how tactful on the customer service side to where you want to just let this thing go along and you don't feel it's appropriate to talk about the payment right away, and you choose to wait, and it could end up being reimbursement by the county deal, right?
We need to ask that when we meet with them right away, because the contract, we're regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, so on a federal level. So those documents need to be very, because I brought up our pricing, actually, we already triggered my general price list, which I have here for anyone that wants that, it's here. We're regulated by Federal Trade Commission. So before we can do a financial contract, we need to know how that's gonna happen, because that might look differently. But at the time of that initial call, we invite them to bring in any life insurance policy and let them know that we're gonna talk about financial information, just so that, we'll go over all that when we get together, but no, we don't ask. I don't ask, and I shouldn't speak for my colleagues here, but you're right, we do not ask that right away. But before we finalize services, yes, we do know where the financials are coming from, because we need to make sure that we're guiding people in a way that, if we go a certain way and they're a county burial, well, we might have just disqualified them for county burial. So of course, we're gonna make sure that we know where the funds are coming from before we finalize anything, because we don't wanna disqualify them for something that they, have rightfully coming either.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Witter.
No, this is nothing to do with the county. Out of curiosity, since you know a lot about this, years ago, my husband and I prepaid a funeral. Okay, so I'm sure you probably invest that money. Now, depending on prices going up or down, is it a usual thing that your costs are covered then, or does it depend on the people left behind, what they order or whatever?
So good question. Again, consumer laws in Minnesota are really good.
Okay.
And so it really protects the consumer. A funeral home cannot deposit a dime of pre-funded money in their own account by law. We have to place that in trust with, usually it's a life insurance company, but it can also be a bank. For the medical assistance program, that's a whole nother conversation. It's almost always a life insurance policy, because that's what the state MA program, how we can shelter the most dollars for people if they go on medical assistance so that their funeral's paid for. And that's because people can't access a life insurance policy, they can access a funeral trust in a bank. So that's why they want that. So it smells and feels more like a bank CD, but it's actually in a life insurance policy, and it's not in our account at all. At the time of need, that will grow. We accept those funds as payment. Some funeral homes guarantee, some do not, those funds. If the growth on the policy is more than what the funeral went up, we can't charge more than what the current prices are. But if it goes up less, we can choose to absorb that in our operations, or we can, or there be a balance from the family. With the interest rates the way they have been lately, most funeral homes do not guarantee, and they're really clear about it when people pre-fund, so that's a whole. But that is a way that actually the increase in people pre-funding, you guys would agree with this, I'm sure, has really cut down on county burial assistance.
So when somebody applies for medical assistance, or like people in our long-term care facilities that are on medical assistance, they can protect, I think, is it up to $6,000, Stephanie? What? $1,500 is all? I thought it was more than that. $1,500 for a burial. And that we would not count that as an asset against them being eligible for medical assistance.
$1,500.
No, they can actually shelter 100% of the actual burial expenses as long as it's placed in an irrevocable life insurance policy that's assigned to the exact word by law as any funeral home as its interest may appear. Can't be Dingman Funeral Care. You know, it has to be any funeral home, and that's again consumer protection, so that if I go out of business, the next guy can take it, or if they don't like me anymore, they can, you know, or they move, whatever it is, they're protected, so those funds are cash. But it's 100%, it's $1,500 if it's in like just a bank account, not set up properly. But if they meet with the funeral home and have a statement and put it in a life insurance policy, again, the life insurance policy tastes and feels more like a bank CD, but it's not, it's a life insurance policy. Then they can shelter the full amount. And again, it's within reason, so it has to be whatever is customary amounts.
And I would say a lot of our financial workers, especially in long-term care, they're potentially working with families as the elder gets closer and closer to being eligible for MA, and might be, you know, helping them out with some of these kinds of conversations about what to do with their funds.
Well, thank you, Brian. I'd like to give the others a chance if they had anything to add from the other funeral homes in Wright County.
Hi, I'm Greg Peterson, Gregpeterson from Swanson Peterson Funeral Homes. We are in Cokato and Howard Lake. I do live in Wright County too, by the way. Yes, our funeral directors union, we do meet out on the golf course every Tuesday looking for new members if you want to join. But, I guess I can just speak to, you know, glad Brian went first. He's very much older and been around much longer, so just kidding. But speaking to what he said, you know, I guess mainly about the mental health part of things as well. You know, as funeral homes, as funeral directors, we are in the business not of just disposing of bodies. We're in the business of memorializing. And, you know, I think we said $2,000 was the number we saw up there. You know, really $1,400, I think, is where we start with just disposition, right? And then $200 to get to that $1,600 is for memorialization.
Yep.
Well, I cannot do a memorial service for $200. Can't pay somebody to do a memorial service, can't provide that memorial service really for $200. So really where we're at with that cremation, that just disposition is really at that $1,400, I think, is that what most of us are applying for most of the time? Is the 14. So, you know, looking at, you know, what other counties provide, mainly at what we can provide to families, I guess, we just need more dollars to do that in order to provide what, you know, the mental health part of things and what we feel like we should be providing to families.
So can I ask Mr. Chair a question?
Commissioner Vetch?
Because I'm getting a little confused. Is it, because that $1,400, that's not considering labor, that's just.
That's what we would pay $1,400 for a cremation with professional services.
Yes, but I know that's what that. But that's not counting the actual. Is that the labor cost to you? I mean, because I'm like going, or is that the cost of a casket, the vault piece to it, or because to me, okay, they're telling me a casket and a vault bare minimum wholesale cost is like $1,500. And now we're paying $1,500. That didn't even take any time of you driving to pick up that body. That didn't take into account anything. So my question really is, I mean, we're paying really just for materials. We're not paying for any of your labor, correct?
Correct, correct. And, you know, if we are looking at 2,600, like Brian mentioned, for what we call a traditional service, meaning casket, burial, a burial vault, which is required by most cemeteries in our area, at 2,600, we are literally going behind. We're doing not only charity, but a lot of times we're absorbing costs for things that we have to pay out. Like Brian said, when we have a family come through the door, that's really the only source of income, I guess you could say, that we have. We don't, have many other sources of income. So when we're serving a family, we have to average a certain dollar amount in order to keep our doors open, in order to pay, lights, heat, those things. And at 1,400, or, if our expenses are more, which they become more when we have to embalm, when we have to use a casket, when we have to use a vault, we are not doing that. We will not, if 100% of those were paid at that 1,400 or 1,600 or even 2,000 or 2,600 for traditional, we would not keep our doors open.
And just for the
All right.
board's information, we do our due diligence. We oftentimes have requests for county burials where maybe the family is here, but the individual actually was somewhere else. We just had a situation with Hennepin County where we determined that the person was actually a Hennepin County resident, not a Wright County resident. So we do our due diligence. We look through, for a lot of the folks, they are on medical assistance, so we do have readily available financial information that we can review before making a determination. And we sometimes talk with families throughout this process when they apply, and our application is online, so people can apply at any time for the county burial
I find
process.
it interesting that Meeker County and the comparisons and the smaller budget and resources and all they have there is tied for the highest on this list. And I find that interesting. Did Mr. Euchre, do you have anything to? Very well said. Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg.
Mr. Chair, I wonder
Yes,
if
Commissioner
Meeker reviewed theirs more recently than anyone else.
They did just review theirs. Kim contacted with them in September, you said?
No, it was McLeod.
Oh, McLeod was in September.
In September of this year.
And McLeod's just went up to 2,400. We don't know what they were before, but.
Right. So I wasn't necessarily coming forward with a recommendation, just with the observation that it's been many years since we've had an increase in this. There's no reimbursement at the state or federal level. These are county level or county levy dollars, and this is a charge the county has is to bury indigent people in our county. So, and we just happen to be the program that runs that, or the department that runs that program.
Any other thoughts from the board?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can we put it out for bids like we do for other things? That was in bad taste. I apologize.
Well, one thought I have is, given the makeup of the board currently to next year, and two of us here next year, three of us, the majority won't be, would be to revisit it next year. It's been 30 years. It's not an emergency, but seems like they make a good case to
So Chair?
have it go further. Commissioner Newsom?
Yeah, I was just, we have our budget set for this year. We can't raise it. So that's, I guess, my concern is do we have enough in our budget if we do raise what we pay now?
What is our, for 2023, our budget is set at 30, I don't know, Christine has it available. 30,000. I mean, it's up to the board. We could change, I don't want to, we could change the amounts or realign the amounts, and then, we could surpass the budget or not. We have in the past on years, we don't know how many deaths we're going to experience, and of those deaths, how many people are going to be indigent. So this is always a guessing game at best. I certainly can come back mid next year, and Kim can let you know where we're at with things. And so what we'll be doing in December is I'll be bringing you our policies and procedures, of which the county and burial cremation is that. You could agree to change the policy and procedure, and the budget would just naturally follow that, with potentially, a change in 2024, I guess. If that makes sense. I mean, we have overruns in areas of our budget, and other areas where we don't get up to our budget amount.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Lyden.
do we have actual numbers on what we've paid out the last 2, 3 years?
Yes. To date, or I'm sorry, in 2021, we paid out $21,548. In 2020, we paid out $38,588. And in 2019, we paid $58,173.
So in other words, we really haven't been paying attention to those numbers, and those budgets should have probably
Right.
have been raised anyway.
And things happen like pandemics and things. I mean, we don't know. This is just one of those areas where we budget for it based on best information at the time. We can certainly change our policies and procedures to reflect, and I think there has been for 30 years a definite change in the time toward more cremations and fewer burials. This would be something to think about as well. So,
So, Mr.
Commissioner Vetch?
I
you had-
guess my perspective on it would be is to enter into some sort of a budget amendment, and I just know how this would go. The best intentions would be to say to look at it next year come budgets, and it may happen, it may not. I guess I'm more on the side of it. $15,000 to $20,000 budget amendment is what you're looking at.
Right.
And this is one of those things that we throw a dart at the wall. I mean, you don't knowing how many people are going to pass or not pass that are on this.
well, and if I just could give you my opinion, I think it'd be good for this board to make a decision, and part of that because we just talked about the numbers. There's a couple dozen county burials, and these are people that passed. We have so many important health and human services programs that serve thousands and thousands of people that are still with us. And I'd like to, if I have an opportunity to talk to a new board, kind of focus on, opportunities to help people. This is definitely a reimbursement program we have for people that, die in extremis.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think that we need to get in line with what the true costs are, certainly, and however we can make that happen.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Lyden.
for those of you that are in the business, is 3,100 a fair amount?
And across the board,
Staff had a-
3,100?
Brian? Do you want to speak?
Mr. Chair, staff had a perspective as well, sure.
Just a suggestion.
You have to step up to the mic, please.
This is Stephanie Wiley. She's our long-term care supervisor.
Yes, thank you. Nice to meet you. I just have a suggestion, maybe wording it differently. Instead of increasing, allowing people that are not financially responsible to contribute would then help not have county dollars. It would be the family that would be able to contribute directly to the funeral home. So if they're not legally responsible, meaning a spouse or a parent, then a family member could then offset whatever they want to pick and do their selective a la carte menu if they want to enhance something instead of having it come back on county funded dollars. But that's just my 2 cents.
Because I think, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Ray.
my perspective would be to kind of do a hybrid where you'd say that, what the county will put in 28 or 3,000 and the family can put up to 1,000, or non-legal responsible family can contribute up to $1,000 or $1,200. So the county can, whatever, making it a total of around $4,500 or whatever you guys feel is the right part of it, but upping the county's portion to like 28 or 3,000 and then just allowing that whatever 1,000 or 1,500 or that families can contribute.
Brian, could you weigh in? What do you think that would look like?
So with what you're saying, any increase is appreciated. So first off, I don't want to sound like that's not, it depends upon what we mean with that. So is 2,800 the cap that the county's doing, or is that the 2,800 if it's burial? Are we then contributing towards casket and outer burial container? Because that, 2,800 max county, if that includes casket and outer burial container, then now we're down to 2,000. And is that including the cemetery? Now we're down to 1,000 that the funeral home's doing everything else for. So I'm just looking at that. backwards of the system has to have the different parts there to it. And a cremation versus, we don't have that with cremation. I think that's with the cremation, then allowing people to add a service, or if it's burial, allowing people to add embalming. I'm for that, but again, I'm a funeral director, so I'm pretty biased. So I'm not, I recognize that.
Well, it seems like we'd be in line with 3,000 for our part.
So the county could say, you could say, whether or not it was a burial or a cremation, the county contribution, I think, so like Hennepin County has $3,000. It looks like that's the county contribution for a county burial. If the burial costs less than that, then the county would only be charged the lesser amount of that, or $3,000.
And Meeker's got 3,000 either way.
Yeah.
And then do we allow the caveat then for those family members that are not responsible spouse, i.e. whatever, to be able to put up to a no cap or a cap on it, or?
I think a cap on it would only be fair, because if they could really come up with the kinds of dollars that we're talking about, then it really shouldn't be a county burial.
I agree. That's the reason I was kind of saying, like, either whether it's 1,200 or 1,500 or 1,000.
And we wouldn't have to, like, when they're applying for a county burial, they would still have to meet, the determination and all those kinds of things. But then that could be an aside saying the family can contribute up to a certain dollar amount. And my recommendation, if the county's going with $3,000, to not have it exceed $1,500, at all. Because otherwise, I think we're talking, the family could really get a cremation at, someplace for about that much.
I agree, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is there a consensus on county contribution 3,000 either type and up to 1,500 contribution from, would it be outside immediate family contribution, or how are you?
Sometimes there's GoFundMe. Yeah, sometimes there's GoFundMe kinds of things in some situations when it's a very high profile, tragic type of situation. So I don't think you'd probably want to limit it to family necessarily.
Any interested party, yeah. And I guess with that, because this has to be formalized, so I'll make the motion to set that with that cap of. Do you recommend 1,500?
Let's go 1,200.
1,200. All right. I don't know what's a reasonable. I don't want to set that high either, because this is taxpayer dollars.
And I think the wording to say up to 3,000 and the county was just billed for the actual costs then.
Okay.
I'll
Motion
second
made by Commissioner Vetch, seconded by Commissioner Delyden. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you, Board, and thank you for coming and meeting with us today. It's, I think it's probably been about 15 years since we met in a boardroom with the funeral directors. I recall vividly that Mr. Sawatsky was a chairperson, was a board member at that point, so it was a lively discussion at that time too. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you for taking the time, middle of your busy day, and showing up and showing interest. It's a lot tougher to change things like this without the folks here, the Funeral Directors Union, as I say, present in the room. I mean, you can forward material, but if we're not interacting, it's a little different.
So one other matter of business then would be an effective date. We'll reflect our policy and procedure that we're bringing to you at the December 12th HHS board meeting with the new amounts, but did you want an effective date of 12/2022 or January 2023 for the change?
Any thoughts? I guess we're
It doesn't
coming
make
up
a
on
difference to us.
January 1 is a nice clean start date. Does that,
That would be my recommendation with that.
that's our
if
new
you said it's
budget.
a January 1.
okay?
I see heads nodding, that'd be good. Thank you.
All right, we got everything we need on that, Jamie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Then is administration, third quarter financial report from Christine. Hello, Christine.
Good afternoon. It's always so nice when the technology works the first time around. So
Now you
today-
just jinxed it.
Thank you. You're right. What you have in front of you is your third quarter or September of 2022 financial statements. We are at 75% of the year with our revenues at 67% and our expenditures at 71%. Overall, our revenues are higher than last year, with the exception of property taxes and county program aid, which are pretty much right where they normally are for this period of time. Personnel services is the lowest at 69%, and that is largely due to the large number of vacancies and the difficulties we have bringing in new staff in all of our areas. Couple of different topics that I want to hit on before I take a look at the graphs. On page 2, our medical assistance other waiver, it's the first line at the, I'm sorry, it's actually page 3, 5468. That one we budgeted $50,000, and public health has been providing min-choice assessments. They have not been providing waiver, so that does not bring in waiver revenue. It comes in on the side of the time study, which is in a different area in public health. In expenses on page 7, professional services, 6261. That one you'll see is at 48%. Our fraud contract overall is at about 73%, so that's fairly close. In public health, they have a number of contracted services in the different grants, and that one is sitting at 24% of their budget. A portion of that is going to be the $47,000 that was set aside for environmental health, which has now come into public health. Further down on that page, travel, meals, and reimbursement, 6333. That one continues to remain low. It's only at 45% of the year. Our fleet is getting very high utilization, but the costs on that, even though fuel has been so high, is we're staying right on track. So that's really good to see. So then we take a look at the actual graphs. So for income maintenance, we are at, I'm going to try and slide on the screen, but I'm not sure I'm going to have success. We're sitting at about 200,000 below budget, and a lot of that it just is due to the fact that income maintenance financial services expenditures are below budget. They're sitting at 65% compared to where we are at 75% of the year. So the reimbursement or the revenue is also going to be behind. We are averaging about 53.7%, so we're above our 50% mark. Any questions on that one? Social service time study is sitting in a similar situation. They're below about 250,000 in revenue, but their expenditures are also down, and they are correlated. We have seen now a trend in the reimbursement rate for social services been going down. We are working on a project with Hennepin County and a couple of other counties that the Title IV-E administrative dollars that we get through the time study are not coming back to us as they should for the calculation. It's time study cost times time study percentage, blah, 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 secret formula, and it's not working out to be correct. It's not a huge amount for us. For Hennepin County, they're looking at almost $500,000 a quarter. So it's a very disparate, it used to line up exactly, and now it's continuing to spread.
And we've really been looking at those 4E dollars to see why we're kind of tanking on those for over a year now. They've just been kind of going down and down. So I'm glad to hear that. At least there's something that might be an answer, because we couldn't figure it out.
Yeah. Okay, then we have our targeted case management, which is looking fabulous. It's actually above our projection, which is why you can't really see it on the screen because the total covers the projection. Waiver revenue is also right on track. You can ignore the Q4 in there. We had to plug it in for something else we were looking at, but you'll see that it's sitting at 1.42 million and our target is 1.41 billion. So that's been doing great. Waiver revenue, targeted case management, and public health revenues are several of the funding sources that the accounting technician in finance is responsible for. When we get to public health, their revenues, you can see, are under about 300,000 compared to where we're targeted. There's a few big ones. We have the dental initiative that's $100,000 per the year, and that one usually comes in this last quarter of the year. So that will change that one substantially. Also, the preparedness grant is at about 63% of their expenditures. The family planning grant is about 59% of their budgeted expenditures. Child and teen checkup is at 29%, and family home visiting is at 47%. So since all of these grants are reimbursable, when their expenditures shrink below their target, then the revenue does as well. So we've been working with the supervisors and Sarah, and we're taking a look at their overall staff allocations and comparing it to what they're actually being charged and what they're planning with the grant. So we've been working on this for a couple of months now, and hopefully it will be a lot more clear as far as where each staff is expected to code their time, and we can see these trends in the grant expenditures dropping a lot quicker than on a monthly or a quarterly basis.
So we've really been slicing and dicing it, basically, as Christine just said, to see where people are putting their time. But I think that transparency will really benefit us in the long run, because I think, you know, people kind of do with the things that they're most familiar with and things like that. So this, I think, will give the supervisors a really good view of what's actually happening within there, and like where because we want to leverage our staff and want to make sure that we're getting the most that we can. So I think this will be a good effort. That can't hurt.
No. And the last one is our out-of-home placement expenditures. You'll see that we are ahead of our target, and we're also about 200,000 higher than Q3 of last year. A lot of this is just related to the COVID tidal wave as far as the challenges and mental health concerns of our children, and we're seeing, you know, more placements, higher need placements, that translates to higher costs.
And actually, I'm going to interrupt Christine for just a second, because, and I was going to bring this up during the director's comments, but it fits in really well now. You have this handout in your packet, and actually in August we had 132 kids in out-of-home placement, and in September we had 118. It's the lowest number we've had since 2018, when we had 165. So kind of negates a little bit of what Christine just said, but up to in September, we had the lowest number of kids in out-of-home care than we've had in years, which is fantastic. But the numbers belie that, because the numbers are looking like they're
higher cost placements, right, and focusing on the lower cost family foster care, that kind of information. So those are all of the highlights that I have for you today. Are there any specific questions I can answer?
So,
Any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Vetch?
so I understood it correctly, because our placements are down, but because of the facilities we have to use, the dollar amount is up. That was the summary, correct?
I'm going to say yes, and because of that acuity of care post-pandemic and everything we've been seeing in the schools, is that the cost of placement has gone up when we can't find those other homes.
And that was my
homes.
next follow-up question, was are we using escalated care just for the fact that there isn't the availability at the lower cost, or a more what I would call palliative care?
I'm going to ask Michelle, and she's shaking her head no.
Doing lots of head signals back there. So Christine mentioned that the 118 kids, that would be, we have a lot less kids in foster care, the Rule 1 foster care. The Rule 5 residential treatment is exponentially more expensive on a daily basis, and we are seeing a lot more kiddos needing that level of care. We actually are doing well with recruiting family foster homes and training them up, and we have a support group and whatnot. So those we're sitting in a really, I wouldn't say we're where we want to be, but we're in a really good place with family foster homes. So it's not necessarily that we're going to residential or the Rule 5 treatment facilities because we don't have family foster care. That they're two separate.
We just have kids with those actual needs
Absolutely.
that require that residential care.
And then, Mr. Chair, my next follow-up question is the availability of Rule 5 placements within our county or surrounding counties. I know that there has been
It's not
limited,
good.
so we've been having to ship quite far, which is an exponential dollar
Yes.
amount as well.
And you'll also see, if you looked at our emergency shelter, we are way overspent in that, and we typically only put like less than $10,000 because in years past, we really haven't needed emergency shelter. And what we've had to do is have kids stay in shelter because there are so many kids on the waiting list for residential treatment. And so then our costs go up there because kids are waiting either in an emergency shelter or an emergency room in a hospital. And we are in desperate need of more residential treatment facilities.
So, Mr. Chair, are we, I'm kind of trying to figure it away from an accounting perspective, because I'm guessing we're not charging the staff time and mileage into that Rule 5 amount, and just trying to illustrate how much is exponentially more on those Rule 5 cases because of those additional costs. A lot of that's be able to use to articulate the need for different state funding for these type of facilities in our region, and trying to see how much money that we're spending on mileage, overtime, things of that nature.
Yeah, we don't get any more money if they're living at home or in Rule 1 or Rule 5 or a group home.
I just look at where we're accounting for it, because that's just purely what we're paying for a per day for that child in that facility. But if
There's
I'm taking
these other ancillary costs that then we're not providing other services to other kids that would be reimbursable because we're putting so much effort into these very high, again, high acuity cases. I'm not sure if we actually have a position when the legislators come in November. Maybe it would be a good discussion to have, though, just so they're aware again that we lack facilities here. We're also sending our staff out to other states occasionally to meet with these kids, to meet the requirements of face-to-face time. When we can, we do it virtually, but people are getting on planes and in cars to go see these kids too, and that's a cost to the county.
hence the reason why I keep it. And that's, I guess I'm trying to look at calculate how much travel costs do we have on just our Rule 5 placements, either in a quarter or this last year.
I don't know, Christine, can you arrive at something like that or not?
Well,
based on-
I'm just thinking about the time reporting in SSIS, and I don't think case management is all in one category. It's not broken out by, I'm doing case management for a Rule 5 kiddo.
Yeah, I'm looking at Taryn. No.
Yeah.
Just because that would be a
very time
quantifiable,
intensive.
yeah, probably time soon, but it'd be a number that would be really helpful to be able to articulate the need in the region,
Right.
that we'd be saving taxpayer dollars by having it closer to home.
And these discussions, like when we've had these discussions at the state level, it's like, even if they snap their fingers today and came up with funding, it's gonna be 3 years before, you're actually placing kids, because that's just how long it's going to take.
I think one of the things that we're recently talking about, because this really is a statewide issue, is the Wilmer treatment facility used to have more beds for kids that were really one step out of a hospital. But they are so short-staffed that even if they expanded the number of kids that they could take, I'm not sure that they could staff it. But, and then we're swinging the pendulum back toward more treatment facility type of beds. Which honestly, it seems pretty apparent that we need more.
Definitely.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Christine and Michelle.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have executive director's comments.
Yes, so I think I will put to bed that out-of-home placement one. I just would want to be very congratulatory. We actually have quite a few of our child protection supervisors and Christine Treichler here. So Molly Marty, Julie Bamboom, Taryn is our children's mental health supervisor, Christine who works in our licensing area. Really nice job getting those numbers down for those kids in Rural 1. I mean, that's fantastic. I did want to share with you the one you should have in your packet, or also link to the packet. It just came in right before, well, actually probably after Amy did the agenda, but in time for the director's comments. So we have our Wright County Performance Report as provided to us by the Department of Human Services Performance Management Team. If you really want to just cut to the numbers piece, page 7 has the percent of vulnerable adults reported as maltreated with initial disposition for response made within 5 working days. No PIP required, and actually Wright County is at the 99.7%, so almost 100%, up from 99.5%. We are well ahead of both our regional area as far as performance, and well ahead of the statewide performance, which is at 91%. If you look at if you're looking at it, the sidebar there with all those blue lines, I think what else is kind of amazing is that of that 99.7%, we actually worked with 740 maltreatment reports. So that's a high number of maltreatment reports for 2022. On page 9, you've got the percent of open child support cases with paternity established. As we know, it's really important to have paternity established for kids to get the parents engaged at a early age, and when engaged parents are also better paying parents in situations. So in this case, we are doing well above both the regional performance and the statewide threshold, or statewide performance and above the statewide threshold, which is 90%, and we're at 102.77%. And then the percent of open child support cases with an order established, we're doing really well at 96%, so almost 94%, and that's with over 3,200 child support cases. Again, getting that order established early and having a reasonable order established, I think a big change. I used to be a child support officer back in 1992 to 1996, I guess, or 1998, I guess. And it was all about getting a big order and getting, like the most money in the door, only to find that big orders don't have more money coming in the door. It just kind of disenfranchises a lot of parents that can't pay them. It's better to set an order that's reasonable for the parent to pay, and then that actually is a better situation for the entire family. So child support has kind of turned a corner and looks at things differently. And then the percent of current child support paid, there's a PIP suspension here, so there's no PIP required. They've had an unprecedented statewide decline in performance. Obviously, this is child support payments, and this is, the pandemic kind of played havoc with a lot of people's jobs and ability to earn a living. So we're actually doing very well at 78.14%. We would have been really happy with that number a number of years ago. However, we did hit above 80% at one point. So for us, it's a dip. But again, I think it was a dip that we really had no ability to do anything different with. The statewide performance there is at 72%. So there is no PIP on that one, even though we're not at the 80%, because no one is. So that is, I'm very proud and happy to present you with that performance report. I think it shows that Wright County is doing a really nice job in those areas.
Good work. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have Jill, to come up, and you have an item in your packet, how 988 works. And I just asked Jill to, again, come and present some more information about 988. It's our new national, right, Jill? Our new national crisis line. So she just has some more information. We'd like to get the word out about it. You're going to see on the 4th page of your handout, there aren't a ton of calls going there right now, but we're hoping that that can change in the future. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Jamie said, I'd like to provide just a brief update on our mental health crisis call utilization and our future planning. First, to just give you a little background information about the 988 information I just handed out. This is a shift. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline this past July changed their phone number to 988 and their name to 988 Suicide Crisis and Crisis Lifeline. Not only did they change their branding and their service name and title, but they also started expanding services to the local areas as well. So instead of staying national, now they're a national service with some local service. They're trying to connect folks who need it down to the local level to get that hands-on mental health support. By doing this, they created 4 Lifeline centers in Minnesota. So in one of the handouts I gave you, there's a map of Minnesota and the different color coding for counties. Carver County Health and Human Services in Waconia, First Call for Help in Grand Rapids, and First Link in Fargo, North Dakota, and Greater Twin Cities United Way in Minneapolis are the 4 hubs, so to speak. So when someone actually dials 988, based on their area code of their phone number, they're going to get linked to one of those 4 hubs. And then there they have trained staff that will be working through that mental health crisis with the individual. And if they're able to resolve the crisis over the phone, fantastic, their needs have been met and they're good to go. If not, then the 988 call center has access to a large database of local resources, and they'll connect the caller then to the local resource. And so here in Wright County, that's Central Minnesota Mental Health Center. So they would be sent to either our mobile crisis teams to Central Minnesota Mental Health Center or the crisis line that we utilize. So some positives about 988, obviously easy phone number to remember, and it's a national recognized service. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And now there's this connection to local services and resources. Obviously, it's intended to alleviate the strain on hospitals and law enforcement. And at this time, we don't have a fee for this service as a county. It's a free service at this point. Some drawbacks to 988 is right now it's a free service. However, they're needing to find sustaining funding to keep that local connection piece. So they are seeking state funding. And Minnesota is yet to arrive at a decision of where we're going to land and how that's going to look. So hopefully more to come on that we'll find some funding. The only other drawback that I see with 988 is that it is based on the caller's area code. So for example, I live in Buffalo, Wright County, but my phone number starts with 651. So if I call this 988 number, I'll actually get connected to Minneapolis. But at this point, it's still okay because they still have the database of information. They would still connect me to Central Minnesota Mental Health Center, even though. So at this point, that's something they're still working to keep developing. So in addition to our work with 988, we also continue our partnership with Central Minnesota Mental Health Center, as I've referenced. We, as the local mental health authority, we are required to provide a crisis hotline for our county. So for years now, Sherburne, Stearns, Benton County, and Wright have worked together and paid and funded Central Minnesota Mental Health Center to provide that service for us. There has been a price tag, of course, that has changed over the years. In 2021, we paid $78,334 for that service, and 1,142 people were reached. So that comes to about $68.50 per call. So that was in 2021. 2022, we are going to be paying $84,122 for the service, and we are contracted in 2023 to pay $95,500. So obviously, costs of everything continues to rise. So one thing that we do within Wright County is we try to offset the levy dollars by utilizing our community support program state grant. And we basically utilize that state grant to offset the cost for most of the adults that are calling into the crisis center, or crisis line, I should say. So for example, in 2021, we used $51,405 of CSP funding and only $26,929 of county levy. So basically that came to roughly 72% utilizing the state grant and only 28% having to rely on the county levy. So we've been trying to be as judicial with our funding as we can be to cover that cost. I'll refer you to the other handout, the one with the statistics. So again, First Call for Help is our local 988 for our county. And they've only been doing this service, remember, since July. So I only have July, August, and September. They have gotten some calls and made some referrals to our local, and it looks like majority of the referrals to our local center have been to our mobile crisis team, which we have a great working relationship with them, and that has been successful. I also threw on there some stats regarding the Central Minnesota Mental Health Center crisis line, so our local crisis line. And as you can see, there was 891 total calls that came in for mental health crisis, 703 for adult, and 188 for children. So that kind of gives you an idea. And if you look at the graph, it does look like it maybe has reduced a little since July. So we're going to be keeping an eye on this to see if 988 impacts our crisis line and what that impact ends up looking like. So, of course, the one thing that Jamie and I have been talking a lot about is we have to have some kind of a crisis line, and 988 at this point is free. Could we be utilizing 988 as our resource line and not, or maybe save some money on the crisis line through Central Minnesota Mental Health Center? Our county attorneys at this point have said yes, that 988 would suffice. Our rest of our county, the 4 other counties that we work with on this project, their counties have not agreed. So at this point, we have entered into the contract with Central Min for the next year, and we're going to keep an eye on this topic and continue to have those discussions and kind of see where they go. But we also want to make sure that this 988 local connection ends up being financially sustainable and that they can figure out the phone number pieces. So I just wanted to follow that up with an update for you, and if you have any questions.
So, and I would say the other directors, I think at this point, are willing to look at other, because it's a cost to all of the counties. In the past, we used only population to determine how to prorate the cost, because all 4 counties put in toward the crisis line. And then in more recent years, we kind of made a push and we asked them to include a utilization. So Wright County wouldn't necessarily get hit so hard by having a high population but lower utilization. So now we used a combined ratio to come up with what the dollar amount is. But that number keeps going up. I'm not sure if it would be sustainable for the other 3 counties to do the crisis line without Wright County as part of that. So I think either we need to be working with Central Minnesota to some other solution to still have a crisis line, or look at some other options, one of which might be this 988. Jill did have a call out to Scott and Carver counties to see if we could go on with their program that they run, and they weren't able to bring us on at this point. We've reached out to a few other areas. Mobile crisis is geographic and needs to be here. The crisis line is less of a geographic issue as long as they can provide information and resources regarding Wright County. So just to keep you up to date on where we're at with that, we are right now in a contract throughout 2023, but something to keep an eye on, because in my book, 95,000 is close to a full FTE, and boy, I could use that.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jill.
Keith is with us today too, and Keith works very closely with our suicide prevention and has done some of the trainings too. So just a call out to Keith.
Thank you, Keith.
That's all I have today.
Anything else from the board? Okay. We'll adjourn at 2:56.
I thought I seen, or was that under, about canceling, was that under the?
Consent agenda.
Consent, okay.
Yep.
Just want to make sure. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. Adjourn 2:57.